Let's take a look at some information and charts on Zcash for Brave New Coin. So Zcash is a privacy-capable coin which uses proof of work. It is a fork of Bitcoin Core, a very old coin, lots of storied baggage through the years for a variety of reasons, which I'll get to here in a second. If we look at how it works, it uses two different types of addresses. This is where the optional part comes in. And unless there is end-to-end encryption here, Z to Z address, then there really is not any privacy at all. This ends up being a very, very, very small percentage, probably less than 1%. I don't even know the exact number right now, but the amount of transactions on the network that are Z to Z are incredibly small. So this is where it is a Monero competitor. Everything else, which is like 99% of the network, is just Bitcoin, or some other competitor that doesn't offer privacy. Now the issue here is that unless exchanges enable the privacy functionality, which most of them do not, to my knowledge, then no one's going to use this. This requires beyond hobbyist level understanding of the chain. It requires a wallet. Maybe it's easier than I'm leading to believe, but there are steps you need to take beyond just moving it around between exchanges. So until exchanges adopt this functionality, which they likely never will because it isn't exactly above board with regulatory concerns, hence the reason why Monero isn't listed anywhere. The moment Monero gets widely listed, it's dead as a privacy coin because that means it can be completely figured out. So watch for that. On the flip side, if something isn't listed, it's hard to actually get a hold of it. Price doesn't really go anywhere. So Zcash has that on its side in that it's listed in a lot of places, but it's not truly privacy oriented. It's privacy capable. You have to jump through some hoops, and it has that ability. I'll get to that more in a second. The Electric Coin Company, previously the Zcash company, I don't know, they changed their name, but they are basically the devs, or part of the devs behind the protocol changes in the coin. They get part of the block reward. They're kind of doing this perpetual reverse ICO. It's being done in an honest way. I actually like it better than an ICO because it's this faucet payment dripping over time slowly, so it encourages people to actually stay and work. Whereas if you give a bunch of people a bunch of money all at once, they're not really incentivized to do anything, right? Like at least people give Zcash tons of crap about a lot of stuff, but at the very least, they did ICOs in a fashion that the founders reward is what they initially called it. That ran out. They had to make a new initiative to continue to get payment. So at the very least, they're doing it the right way. They take 20% of the block reward. It gets distributed to a few different areas. One being Electric Coin Company, one being the Zcash Foundation, and then a third being grants and external developers, that sort of thing. So anyway, for the most part on these blogs, I just really look for the transparency reports, the quarterly reports. They haven't done one for Q4 yet, but their Q3 report says that they're holding 11.7 million in USD and Zeke. Certainly less than Tezos, less than EOS by a bajillion light years, right? EOS has 5 billion or something, right? And you can read all about what they're doing and who's getting what and where. And if we scroll up a little bit, this is the exact percentages that the miners, the founders, the foundation, the coin company, and employees receive in compensation. So I don't hate this model. I really don't. I think it's the right way to go. I think it's probably a little too much of the pie. 10% is probably the right number to Cred and Zeke and Dash to have treasuries as well. And if you don't have a treasury, then you have to hold out the cup, right? Because you're kind of begging for donations. We see this on Litecoin, we see this on Monero, we see this on Bitcoin, right? Like no one is free from this. How do we pay the developer problem? And how do we stay decentralized and pay the developers? So this model isn't terrible. It's just probably slightly tweaked a little too high. To get back to the privacy aspect, when you see coins or companies like Chainalysis, I always say that wrong, come out and say this was in 2020. They have compliance support for Dash and Zcash. That means any of the privacy capabilities are basically null and void because they can trace virtually everything on these coins. They go on to say in this article that for the reasons I already stated, because there's very little end-to-end encryption, you can't actually stay private in Zcash. So that may change one day, where Zcash is default privacy, end-to-end encryption, gets delisted everywhere, nobody can break it, right? But that's not currently where we're at. And they also go on to say for Dash that it's very easy to see the mixing transactions and the amounts there. So we have Chainalysis coming out saying they can basically crack it. We have Elliptic saying they can monitor. This was in 2020, right? This is like old information, but this is me building my case as far as you have a coin that says it has a use case, which can be traced if it's privacy. So the use case is really null and void. Here's Chainalysis again coming to say everything's basically transparent. And this is a general issue with all of crypto. I think if Satoshi were to redo his work, he would have tried to implement privacy stuff. I'm sure he commented that on some blog or something way back in the day. But clearly there's a gaping hole in BTC that everything's public, right? So Monero at least attempts to solve for that. I'm only bringing up Monero because it's the best example of privacy stuff that we have currently. And they keep trying to crack Monero and they haven't. So there's like, you know, proof is in the pudding and no one's cooking the pudding. No one can make the pudding. Pudding is yet to be served for Monero, and they keep trying. They keep trying to file tracing patents. There was even one Christmas Eve where they tried to bring down the nodes on the network. I don't think we ever found out exactly who that was, but it was very likely some tracing company. Might have been CipherTrace. I don't know. But they're still trying, and this is a Chainalysis employee talking about Monero, saying that Monero's done it right, and that everything else is kind of just easy to figure out. And as early as 2018, this is the Zcash Foundation, they were talking about moving towards privacy by default. So they know this is a problem. This isn't like some open secret. Everybody knows what's going on here, and they really need to shift towards this. At one point in time, I forget who was talking about merging ETH with Zcash, but making Zcash like a sidechain at the end of the day might be the best bet. I don't know, like some sort of coin merger, how that would work, what that would look like. I have no idea. But the ETH and the Zk communities at least look like they get on pretty well. Moving on to the proof of work stuff, hash rate's down 50% since April. Part of that is price. Part of that is probably China related as well. Part of this is just general mining profitability. If mining profitability falls off, you can see hash rate had basically been increasing from 2018 to 2021, and then just boom, dropped dramatically. So very clearly there was an issue, a change in profitability here. Even with Zcash at $125 currently. These are the ASICs currently available and their profitability. They're still profitable, all of them, at 4 cents per kilowatt hour, which is what industrial miners get for electricity for the most part, or lower. No new ASICs coming online. At one point, Zcash had talked about trying to increase de-ASICization on the chain. Then they decided against it, or rather the community voted that it's not that big of a deal. But anyway, not too many ASICs on the chain in general for this algorithm, and no new ASICs in 2021, at least that are announced to be coming. So the first issue with Zcash, in my view, is it's a privacy coin that isn't really private. Okay. The second issue is inflation. Inflation on the coin is still, in the orange here, 11%. So you're competing against everything. You're competing, right? Everything lower than this, Dash, ETH, Doge has lower inflation than Zcash. LTC, Monero, BTC, and we can argue about what has better functionality, what has better developers, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, the supply side selling based on inflation is still above 10%. That isn't a level for BTC that we've seen since 2015, right? I have to scroll way back to get the red here in BTC in 10% inflation. So Zcash is kind of living in 2014, 2015 land, and everyone else is kind of ahead of the times in that inflation perspective. You can see where they released, how it went deflationary or disinflationary, but it's still lagging most of the other proof of work coins. And this is part of that perpetual sort of ICO type thing that I don't generally hate because you're paying people to develop on the coin. But I still think inflation is just too high relative to everything else, right? So those are my two issues with Zcash, just based on metrics. Transaction counts have basically held the 2018 levels, the ranges. Now I should say, as a caveat, because the Zeke people are going to come after me, all of the metrics you see from Coin Metrics do not include shielded transactions. So keep that in mind. These numbers could be much higher in this case than they are. This only represents unshielded transactions. Average transaction values spiked way up when price was at all-time highs. Well, not all-time highs, but multi-month highs. And average transaction values have declined pretty significantly since that time. So the general read on transaction counts here is, despite not having complete data, this is not a bullish picture. We didn't see some mega increase in transaction counts, just sort of stayed in the ranges. Block size also did really nothing. I mean, there's scaling measures here to help decrease the block size over time. So you're not seeing the same protocol year over year. But block size was still low. Fees were up slightly, but really, sub 10 cents, that's not really that big of a deal. Overall block size is nothing. I mean, if we compare that to BTC, for example, it's, it doesn't even register on the scale as far as block size is concerned. So this tells me that very little people in general are using the chain, which isn't what you want to see. You don't want to die in the dark if you are an altcoin. Total Zcash stored in shielded pools, both Sprout and Sapling. Very small amount of total Zcash in circulation, but it is growing, so it does have that going for it. It is up and to the right. Sprout is the older implementation of that. These transactions by quarter, again, you want fully shielded. If most of this isn't fully shielded, then what's the point, really? And those fully shielded transactions had been growing. We'll see what the rest of 2021 has in store, but we need Zcash to increase those fully shielded transactions by a substantial amount to even consider true privacy on the coin. NVT, which again doesn't include shielded transactions, but this has creeped to all-time lows. So if there's any coin on NVT that's telling you that the coin is a buy, it's Zcash, because based on economic utility relative to market cap, NVT is screaming a buy here at all-time lows. Do I trust it? Of course not. It's one, it's Zcash. Two, it's NVT, which I think doesn't really have a place in a lot of analysis in general. I've never been a fan. I just use it and look at it because other people do. No disrespect to Willy Woo. I just have never found it super useful. Here is the active address count, which rose since 2020 and then came off again in after April. So not on a bullish trend as far as addresses are concerned. Again, this does not include shielded addresses. If we look at MVRV, which is a direct inverse metric of on-chain activity versus market cap, if we look at price in the red here, anytime price has tipped high relative to MVRV, so MVRV spikes above 1.5, so that's on-chain activity relative to market cap. Anytime that spikes above 1.5, basically been the top. 2, I guess arguably it's gotten to 2 a couple times, and it got to 2 this go around. So the signal worked in that you saw highs, they weren't all-time highs, but you saw highs in the price at the value of 2 on MVRV. Basically, the market cap was 2 times greater than the on-chain activity. Again, this does not include shielded transactions, and the sell signal was there. So that made sense, that worked out. There is a grayscale product, Zcash Trust, which by my math has an over 100% premium. It isn't listed directly like ETH or GBTC. There isn't a ticker for it, but you can buy it through Grayscale. Google Trends for Zcash never came close to anything in 2017. Just not a lot of activity. In general, all altcoins are going to have a hard time. The more of them that exist, sort of out-competing each other. This isn't a proof-of-stake coin. It doesn't have yield. It doesn't have DeFi. It's not really privacy. What does it have going for it as a competitor against everything else, right? Inflation is high. It's not on Robinhood. The list goes on and on and on. Why? The Google Trends sort of makes sense. There isn't a lot of enthusiasm and exuberance for Zcash in general. But Trends did reach all-time, well, not all-time highs, but multi-month highs. So this did spike up like everything else, but just not in a big way. So that was my rant on fundamentals. The technical is much cleaner in general, less rationale here to explain, but here's Bitfinex long-short ratio at the top. Longs have continued to come off on the USD pair since January. Yearly pivots, VPVR, RSI, volume, and the 50 and the 200 EMA. So currently everything is experiencing a death cross. Zcash is not spared from that. Everything also has a low time frame Adam and Eve with a bullish divergence. That includes Zcash. Ultimately, if Zcash can hold 100, it's probably fine in the grand scheme of things from a mean reversion semi-bullish recovery perspective. It hit the R5 yearly pivot, so the pivots are telling you, between the pivots and the MVRV, collectively together, those generally have a pretty high hit rate telling you we're a little too hot in price. And basically price just got nuked in a couple days there, along with everything else on like May 18th, something like that. VPVR support didn't really matter. The next support down is around $60. So if this does break 100, I like 60. Other than that, it probably just ranges between 100 and 200 until everything either turns the corner collectively or goes for lower lows. I mean, Zcash isn't going to just move on its own. It never really has. It's been at the whim of everything else. If you look at correlations, I'm sure it's highly correlated with a lot of stuff. So overall, the picture here is neutral to bearish as long as it can hold above 100. Otherwise, it's just going to get range bound below 100, between 25 and 100. There isn't like a lot of strong TA one way or the other there. The strongest thing for mean reversion that I can see is this TKC clamp, the red line and the blue line. This is across everything on the daily. Because we dropped so fast, so quickly, we're putting in this mean reversion trade from, in Zcash's case, 120 to 220. So that's a pretty big size up movement. We aren't bullish on the cloud until we're above 230. Depending on how quick this mean reverts, this red line, this Kijun, is going to move down over time. And price will attempt to meet up with that level, currently at 220. So pretty decent long trade there. On the 4 hour, here's that Adam and Eve, very clean across everything. This was a previous 4 hour attempt, edge to edge / Kumo breakout, whatever, ended up not being. Again, this was across ETH, this was across DeFi, most of DeFi anyway. This is BTC, everything sort of looked the same. That failed, this W failed, right? Now we have this Adam and Eve, and we're finally above the 4 hour. So there's going to be an attempt for bullish continuation here. And then on Zcash BTC, zoomed way out on the 3-day, it's still stuck within this downtrending pitchfork for the past 3 years, going on 4 years. Long shorts on Bitfinex got nuked in mid-May, down to multi-year lows as far as total open interest is concerned. And VPVR sort of tells you the whole story in that price is going to continue to range in this level until it decides up or down. The pitchfork is telling you this probably continues to go down until we're above the pitchfork for a considerable period of time. And your buy zone, if you're looking to buy lows, would be down in the white area down here of the pitchfork that may be around new all-time lows at this point in time. Really, if I'm buying this ever, I want to see this multi-month bull div. This was one of the greatest examples you're ever going to see of a multi-month bull div in the bottom of a range, telling you, okay, it's probably time to buy. So overall, the fundamentals are weak. Inflation's still too high. There are a few things I like with Zcash, but ultimately it doesn't overtake the things that are problematic. Technicals are basically correlated with everything else on the planet as far as crypto is concerned, and Zcash isn't going to move by itself. USD pairs look decent for a mean reversion, and the BTC pair just looks like it's in a perpetual downtrend, which makes sense if it's got 10x the inflation of BTC. Lastly, I'll just mention the ETH-BTC fund and DeFi portfolio I trade for Techemy Capital on Enzyme.finance. Non-custodial portfolio management tool. You can send Ether USDC to the smart contract or just watch what I'm doing. Everything's transparent. You can see AUM performance, allocation, trades, deposits, withdrawals. You can see that I bought some ETH and BTC at 3 a.m. last night EST because of the W stuff. I'm still trickling, dripping those buys. I bought some Unilink and Aave as well. Those look pretty decent. I'm just not convinced that we are fully ready for any bullish continuation, obviously. And even this mean reversion, I think, is going to have some trouble. But it's look good enough to buy. So anyway, that's all for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe. Happy trading.